Not the president's word games and deflection. It is the substantive foreign policy crisis that is engulfing his presidency. A bipartisan chorus of national security experts, legislators, and Donald Trump's own staff say that he publicly failed in this now very controversial summit with Vladimir Putin. This fallout is intense even by the standards of this Trump era because Donald Trump made history in a bad way. And this is still sinking in for some, but this is the first time an American president ever joined a Russian leader to undercut our own intelligence. And that extreme conduct on the world stage has been so severe, so obviously counter to the U.S. national interest, that Donald Trump was facing overwhelming internal pressure to take it back somehow. So tonight, one day later, he is saying he misspoke at a single point when siding with Putin. Trump desperately trying to change the subject away from his own pandering towards an adversary to the absurd claim that it all boils down to a missing contraction.
I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative. So you can put that in, and I think that probably clarifies things pretty good by itself.
Sort of a double negative. You can put that in. The president's referring to this.
They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Trump was saying there's no reason why it would be Russia that hacked the U.S., as the CIA and DOJ have already found. That is Putin's message. Now, tonight, he wants everyone to change the would to the opposite word. We can go ahead and do it. There. He wants to change it to wouldn't. But that's not all. Trump is, let's be clear, trolling everyone. This is a trick we've covered on the show. He wants everyone to get angry and outraged and spend time responding to this literal word game. But that wouldn't be worth much time, because even if Trump amends one word from yesterday, the news tonight, what matters to America, is this foreign policy crisis is the same because his policy remains the same. Trump invoked Putin's denial of meddling and undercut the CIA and attacked Mueller. And he wants everyone to talk about this. You can see it in some of the headlines in the coverage, and make it about would versus wouldn't. If that sounds stupid, it's because it is stupid, and it's stupid by design, trying to push everyone to play the word game and then use this pettifogging to spin and pretend that maybe there was a mistake that is being corrected. MSNBC's Chris Matthews explained exactly what was going on when this news first broke today.
Spin is a two-step process. The first thing you do is you say something that your audience wants to hear. I made a mistake. Then, oh, he's being honest with us. And in that moment when they're buying it, you then tell them to lie again. It's a game. It's a technique. It's called spin.
It's called spin. So let's put aside the spin and go through the facts right now. Trump still failed to push for extradition of these newly indicted Russians at this meeting. He failed to pressure Putin in any way on that world stage. He failed to use diplomacy or the NATO summit or the threat or actual reality of future sanctions to build the united front against Russia. He also failed to take the cyber attack seriously. That's embedded in all of these comments, which of course makes it harder to prevent them, for example, in the coming midterms. And that is part of why so many Republicans continue blasting him today.
It's the most pathetic display by an American president that I've ever witnessed.
President Trump was wrong yesterday in a major way, and I think it was a very embarrassing press conference.
To do that on a world stage was, for me, indefensible.
The Senate is not on the same page as the president.
I think it was a bad day for the president. I think he can fix it. I think he needs to fix it.
That is the substantive and important news tonight. That is the pressure that continues as Trump tries to distract. This is a foreign policy failure that the Trump-friendly Wall Street Journal is dubbing a national embarrassment, and which reveals Donald Trump to be a sad, embarrassing wreck of a man. That's according to conservative George Will, who says Trump is putting America last. Trump's hometown paper invoking his famous claim he might get away with shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, but today's cover casts the victim as Uncle Sam, a victim of quote-unquote treason. You know, in the long, rich history of trash talk, there is an old saying, "I wish you would," which people say when pushing someone to step up and provoke a fight. No one ever says, "I wish you wouldn't," when they mean, "I wish you would." And no one really believes that Trump said the opposite of what he meant and needed 24 hours to correct the record tonight. In other words, I'm basically giving you another way of noting that many people don't believe the president tonight. Not his spin about siding with Putin, not his original claims for why he keeps backing Putin instead of the U.S. and our CIA and our intelligence estimates and our DOJ. Why is the president putting another country first, according to so many experts, some of which I just showed you? That question's obviously disturbing. The possible answers, perhaps even more so. And that's where we begin our reporting tonight. I'm joined by Heather McGhee, a senior fellow at the think tank Demos, and David Rothkopf, a visiting scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. David, those are some of the questions. What are your answers?
Well, I think the answer is that the president is doing what it said in big letters on his notes today. He wanted to emphasize was not being done. You know, he wrote, "There is no collusion." Well, actually, there is collusion. This kind of distraction that you're talking about is collusion. It's as much collusion as obstructing justice. And, you know, when you think about the news of the past week, what we ought to be talking about is that the special counsel came down with a set of indictments against the Russian military, against the Russian military intelligence unit, the GRU, giving their names, understanding that this was a military operation against the U.S. And at the same time, the Director of National Intelligence, a conservative Republican former senator from Indiana, Dan Coats, said that the red lights ought to be flashing, that we are still under attack. And what Donald Trump is doing is talking about wordplay and distraction. And that serves Vladimir Putin. And that serves the objective of his operation. And so Trump is colluding with Putin to distract and to enable him to continue an intelligence operation against the United States that's been ongoing for well over a couple of years now.
Heather?
You know, there's been so much Republican outrage, and yet there's been a lot of words and not a lot of action. And I think now it's really important to really press them to do something. They actually have a number of constitutional powers. Chuck Schumer put out a tweet of a bunch of different things that could be done. I have 4 other ideas of what Republicans could do. They could pass legislation to demand that Donald Trump do what every president since Watergate has done, which is release his tax returns, so we know what the connections are financially. He could put this country on war footing for exactly the same reason that was just mentioned, in that we know that they are eyeing our state elections systems for 2018. Republicans could actually say that we have to slow down this conversation about Kavanaugh, who is someone who has already said that there should be a get-out-of-jail-free card for a sitting president. I mean, these are the types of things that I think would really show what is starting to be sort of covered, which is that, oh, the Republicans are finally starting to put country over party. But that's fine in a statement. It's fine in a tweet. We need to actually see action.
Well, action is so important. And David, that's part of why we were quoting my colleague Chris Matthews on decoding the spin, because even today, with trying to get people distracted, the president doubled down on the part of this that creates the foreign policy crisis, continuing to sow doubt about Russia's responsibility, which he did with a kind of an ad lib about, quote unquote, other people. Take a look.
Let me be totally clear in saying that, and I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. Could be other people also. There's a lot of people out there.
A lot of people out there, David.
Well, you know, he says in one breath, I accept the intelligence community's conclusion, and then in the next breath, he contradicts it, because the intelligence community concluded that Russia was there and Russia was acting alone. And so, you know, he puts the lie to himself again. And at the same time, we're not having that conversation about what he's doing to stop the Russians right now, or what he may have done in his secret meeting. There was a story today in the Washington Post that I thought was kind of interesting, that the two top cyber organizations in the United States government have decided to collaborate to stop any intervention in the 2018 election in the absence of direction from the White House. In other words, they said, well, we haven't heard from the White House on this, so we're going to undertake it on our own. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the intelligence community and the law enforcement community and the national security community in the United States stand up and say, well, look, if we're not led from the White House, we have taken an oath to the Constitution, and we're going to protect the United States, whether the president wants us to do that or not.
Well, and that, Heather, goes to the responsibility of so many other so-called leaders in government. Take a look at Paul Ryan today.
Russia is a menacing government that does not share our interests, and it does not share our values. And I think that should be made very, very clear.
So should President Trump be rebuked?
Yeah, what could you do? I mean, you guys are a co-equal branch of government. What could you do to make sure that he doesn't do something?
Here's what we have already done, and here's what we could continue to do, which is to put sanctions on Russia.
So many other things that could be done. They could censor the president. There are all the things I just said. They could actually take up the legislation to protect the Mueller investigation. And I think the Republicans have some soul searching to do as well. I mean, if you think about Putin's strategy right now, across the globe, he has been propping up far-right white nationalist candidates. He has been undermining democracy. It makes sense that they would seek to infiltrate the Republican Party as it now exists, a Republican Party where, you know, the standard bearer has been endorsed by the KKK and says that there are fine people on both sides of Nazis marching down the streets. And then fundamentally on the question of democracy, I mean, there were definitely attacks on our democracy, and everyone's talking about that in the Republican Party right now. But the Republican Party has made it their strategy to suppress as many votes of people who do not agree with them. And they have made it their strategy to weaken our campaign finance laws, to have American oligarchs be the ones who are setting the rules for the rest of the country. So I hope that this is the beginning of some real soul searching about exactly how much daylight there actually is between the Russian strategy to undermine American democracy and the Republican strategy.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.